I am guaranteeing you that Adam Silver and the other WNBA owners will emerge victorious from this negotiation because the WNBPA, the Players Association, is an outright mess.
The battle is over. The outcome is clear. The WNBA Players Association has effectively lost the collective bargaining fight. And it didn't happen because they lacked leverage. It didn't happen because billionaire owners refused to spend. It happened because they were completely outmaneuvered. What we're witnessing is one of the most dramatic collapses in modern sports labor negotiations. The union leadership walked into negotiations believing they held the upper hand. They believed the economic momentum surrounding Caitlin Clark had shifted the balance of power in their favor. They believed they could pressure a group of billionaire owners into submission. But that confidence turned out to be a massive miscalculation. Instead, they walked straight into a carefully constructed psychological trap, and now the consequences are playing out in real time. Welcome to the full breakdown. Because what happened behind the scenes reveals one of the most calculated negotiation strategies we've seen in years. We're going to examine the strategy behind the so-called deadline pressure. We're going to break down the internal leak that reportedly fractured the union's unity. And we're going to explain why the WNBPA is now scrambling to control the narrative in public. To truly understand how this situation unraveled, you have to look at the figure many believe helped shape the strategy from the ownership side. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the National Basketball Association and a key power broker connected to the ownership structure of the Women's National Basketball Association. Silver is widely known as a calculated negotiator. His approach isn't driven by emotion or media optics. It's rooted in timing, leverage, and psychology. While the players' union pushed aggressive public campaigns and reportedly demanded around 27% of gross revenue, Silver and ownership groups focused on something else entirely: the calendar. They understood a critical vulnerability. Nearly 80% of the league's players were approaching unrestricted free agency. For many mid-tier players, the next contract isn't just about career growth, it's about financial survival. A prolonged strike would create enormous economic pressure on the very players the union leadership depended on to stay unified. So instead of battling over money first, the strategy centered on time. During All-Star Weekend, Silver stepped to the microphone and delivered what many analysts viewed as a subtle but powerful negotiating move: the March 10th deadline. Former sports executive David Sampson later described it as a classic pressure tactic: create urgency, tighten the timeline, and allow economic anxiety to fracture the opposition from within.
As this is a statement from today, from the executive committee. In every CBA negotiation, the goal of the league and teams is to divide the players. These negotiations are no different.
That date didn't come from a rule book. It wasn't written into any legal framework. It was simply introduced to create urgency, and urgency changes everything in negotiations. The concept is simple: establish a deadline, attach major consequences to it, and suddenly the pressure skyrockets. The message to players becomes clear: if there isn't a deal by March 10th, the season could be delayed and serious problems follow. But here's the key question: was March 10th actually a legal cutoff? Not really. The Women's National Basketball Association season doesn't begin until May. In theory, negotiations could continue well into April without affecting the schedule. However, the ownership side had little interest in letting negotiations drag out that long. By introducing an earlier deadline, they created a sense of immediate crisis, a ticking clock designed to increase pressure inside the players' ranks. And that pressure quickly began to show. Once Adam Silver publicly mentioned the March 10th timeline, tension inside locker rooms reportedly intensified. Players suddenly had to confront the possibility that a prolonged standoff could affect paychecks and contracts. Veterans worried about the long-term stability of the league. Younger players faced uncertainty about their financial future. Within the Women's National Basketball Players Association, frustration began to surface. Union Vice Presidents Kelsey Plum and Breanna Stewart reportedly raised serious concerns about how negotiations were being handled. Instead of presenting a united front, internal disagreements escalated. A detailed letter criticizing communication and strategy was directed toward the union's executive director, Terry Carmichael Jackson. The issue wasn't just the disagreement itself. Disagreements happen in nearly every labor negotiation. The real damage came when the letter leaked publicly. Once the internal conflict surfaced in media coverage, including reports highlighted by ESPN, it exposed visible fractures within the union's leadership. Instead of projecting unity, the organization suddenly appeared divided at a critical moment in negotiations. In high-stakes labor disputes, unity is often one of the strongest bargaining tools a union has. When internal conflict becomes public, it can weaken that leverage dramatically. Former sports executive David Sampson has often pointed out that in corporate negotiations, the most damaging mistake a negotiating group can make is allowing internal divisions to become public knowledge. Once that happens, the balance of power can shift quickly.
NBA has emerged victorious in its battle against the Players Association. While you have not read that there has been a
When a union faces internal conflict, the most critical rule is simple: keep those disputes inside the room. The moment the other side discovers cracks in your unity, they gain a powerful advantage. In high-stakes negotiations, any sign of division can be used to increase pressure and weaken your position. That principle is especially true in billion-dollar sports negotiations. When reports surfaced that Kelsey Plum and Breanna Stewart had raised serious concerns internally within the Women's National Basketball Players Association, and that those concerns had leaked to the media, it signaled something important to the other side of the table. Ownership groups and league executives closely monitor media coverage from outlets like ESPN during negotiations. When internal disagreements become public, it suggests that the negotiating side may not be completely unified, and unity is often a union's greatest source of leverage. In corporate bargaining, once one party believes the other side is divided, the strategy can shift dramatically. Instead of making new concessions, negotiators may simply slow the process down and wait. The reasoning is straightforward. If pressure is already building internally for the other side, time itself becomes a negotiating tool. That dynamic became especially important amid discussions surrounding the proposed March 10th timeline connected to negotiations with the Women's National Basketball Association. Whether that date was symbolic or strategic, the public debate around it intensified the sense of urgency among players and fans. Former sports executive David Sampson, who has been involved in major league negotiations during his career, has frequently explained that once a negotiating group appears divided publicly, it becomes much harder to maintain leverage at the table. In those situations, the outcome of the dispute can begin to feel inevitable long before a final agreement is actually signed. The negotiations continue, the discussions carry on, but the real turning point may have already happened behind the scenes. Interview 4. The outcome of these negotiations is becoming clearer by the day. From the outside looking in, many analysts believe the league's leadership, including Adam Silver and the ownership groups connected to the Women's National Basketball Association, currently hold the stronger position. Not simply because of money, but because the players' side appears to be struggling with internal coordination. High-stakes labor negotiations require unity above all else. When a players' association looks divided, it weakens the collective leverage that unions rely on. In recent weeks, reports about disagreements and leaked communications from within the Women's National Basketball Players Association have fueled a perception that the organization is dealing with internal turmoil. Trying to negotiate with billionaire ownership groups and private equity investors is always a complex and calculated process. Those negotiations often resemble a strategic chess match where timing, messaging, and discipline matter just as much as the financial demands on the table. But the story does not end with the negotiation itself. When an organization faces public criticism during a high-profile dispute, the next phase usually becomes a battle over narrative. Public perception can influence fans, sponsors, media coverage, and even future bargaining power. After the controversy surrounding the leaked internal letter became public, the union's executive leadership moved quickly to release a statement on social media emphasizing unity and solidarity among players. From a public relations standpoint, this kind of response is typical in professional sports disputes. Organizations often try to reassure fans, agents, and players that the group remains aligned despite outside speculation. Whether that message will successfully restore confidence is another question entirely. Once internal disagreements become public, rebuilding credibility can take time. In modern sports, where every development spreads instantly across social media and major outlets, controlling the narrative becomes almost as important as the negotiations themselves. Interview 5. In nearly every collective bargaining negotiation, union leaders warn that the league's strategy is to create division among players. The message is simple: stay united, stay disciplined, and do not allow outside pressure to fracture the group.